I have spent the last 48 hours reviewing strike telemetry, maritime insurance filings, Ukrainian Port Authority communiques, and satellite imagery of the northern Black Sea littoral. And what I am about to tell you is not what you are seeing on your cable news chyron. While every mainstream outlet is focused on the casualty count in Odesa's Primorsky district, the shattered hotel facades, the buckled apartment blocks, the 14 confirmed wounded, including 2 children, they are completely missing the strategic geometry of what just happened. This was not a terror strike. This was a calibration. In the past 7 days alone, Russian forces have launched approximately 1,900 attack drones, nearly 1,400 guided aerial bombs, and roughly 60 missiles of various types at Ukrainian territory. Let that figure land in a single week. And a significant concentrated wave of that tonnage was pointed directly at Odesa, Ukraine's primary maritime seaport on the northern Black Sea coast. Port infrastructure inside the greater Odesa hub sustained confirmed damage. A Nauru-flagged commercial vessel, the Ramco, was struck while transiting a Ukrainian maritime corridor. An energy facility inside a cargo terminal was hit, igniting localized fires. Now here is what the mainstream narrative is structurally incapable of telling you, because it requires synthesizing military doctrine, energy economics, and maritime law simultaneously. Russia is not simply trying to kill people in Odesa. Russia is executing a deliberate multi-vector campaign to make the Black Sea commercially uninhabitable. Every drone that finds a cargo terminal, every strike that walks rounds across port infrastructure, every night that Ukrainian repair crews spend patching power substations instead of loading grain, each of those events is a data point being absorbed in real time by war risk insurance underwriters in London, Singapore, and Hamburg. And once those underwriters reprice, the cascade begins. Not next quarter. Now, the Port Authority confirmed damage to a vessel already transiting what was supposed to be a protected maritime corridor. That is the message embedded inside this strike package. It is not directed at Kiev. It is directed at every shipowner on Earth who is currently calculating whether to send a vessel into those waters. I am going to show you exactly how that message was delivered, what hardware enabled it, and why the global economy should be paying extremely close attention. To understand why Odesa is the single most strategically consequential target in this entire war, one must first understand the geography of coercion. The Black Sea is not an ocean. It is a 436,000 square kilometer enclosed basin, a geographic prison with exactly one exit, the Bosphorus Strait, a narrow choke point controlled by Turkey under the Montreux Convention. Every vessel entering or leaving must pass through approximately 31 kilometers of Turkish waterway. There is no alternate route. There is no flanking maneuver for a cargo ship carrying 60,000 metric tons of wheat. The geography does not negotiate. This enclosed topology is precisely what makes Russian drone saturation strategy so geometrically lethal. In open ocean warfare, a distributed threat can be diluted across vast sea room. Vessels reroute, convoys disperse, but in the Black Sea, dispersion is not an option. Vessels are funneled through predictable corridors that Russian ISR assets, including satellite-cued Shahed launch batteries and forward-deployed naval drones, can map with high fidelity. There is no hiding in these waters. The electromagnetic profile of a 200-meter bulk carrier is detectable from the moment it clears Odesa's breakwater. Now overlay the operational terrain of Odesa itself. The city sits on a bluff above the Black Sea shoreline, approximately 450 kilometers southwest of the front lines in Zaporizhzhia. It is theoretically deep in Ukraine's rear area, the kind of strategic depth that Western doctrine assumes provides buffer time for defensive preparations. But Russian long-range drone architecture, specifically the Iranian-designed Shahed 136 and its domestically produced Jiran 2 variants, erases that depth calculation entirely. With operational ranges exceeding 2,000 kilometers and the ability to loiter, these systems do not care about frontline distance. They care about GPS waypoints and fuel duration. Odesa's geographic depth is a fiction in this operational environment. This is the foundational vulnerability that Western military planners have consistently underestimated since February 2022. The assumption that rear area infrastructure is protected by distance. It is not. In a drone-saturated battle space, rear area and front line are functionally synonymous threat environments. The only distinction is which directional vector the strike package arrives from. Furthermore, the specific targeting of the port complex, rather than purely residential or command infrastructure, signals a deliberate doctrinal choice by Russian planners. The port of Odesa handles the vast majority of Ukraine's maritime export volume, including grain shipments critical to North African and Middle Eastern food security. It is the single most economically consequential piece of infrastructure on Ukrainian soil. Degrading it does not just hurt Ukraine, it applies indirect economic pressure across Turkey, Egypt, Lebanon, Tunisia, and a constellation of global South nations that import Ukrainian grain at subsidized volumes. This is not a tactical choice. This is theater-level coercion through infrastructure targeting, a doctrine the Soviet military science tradition calls deep battle applied through asymmetric, unmanned kinetic systems. Traditional Western counter-battery doctrine, built around radar queuing and interceptor aircraft response times measured in minutes, is operationally misaligned with swarm architectures that arrive in waves from multiple azimuths at subsonic but varied flight profiles. The physics of defending a coastal port from 94 simultaneous inbound drones, the confirmed figure from a single overnight window, is fundamentally different from defending against a massed armor formation. The geography does not favor the defender here. It never did. The architecture of Russia's sustained drone campaign against Odesa is neither random nor improvised. It is the product of operational learning accumulated across 4 years of live-fire experimentation against Ukrainian air defenses, and the engagement model that has emerged is deliberately engineered to overwhelm layered point defense systems through volume, variance, and vectoring. The primary strike asset remains the Shahed 136 Garand II platform. This is a delta-wing, jet-pusher, unmanned aerial vehicle with a warhead payload of approximately 50 kilograms of high-explosive fragmentation. Its unit cost is estimated between $20,000 and $50,000 depending on component sourcing, a figure that becomes operationally significant when placed against the cost calculus of intercepting it. A Ukrainian Iris-T interceptor missile runs approximately $430,000 per round. A U.S.-supplied AMRAAM used in conjunction with NASAMS batteries costs approximately $1.5 million per unit. A Patriot PAC-3 CRI interceptor exceeds $4 million per missile. This cost asymmetry is not incidental. It is the entire strategic logic of the campaign. Russia is not trying to achieve a single decisive kinetic effect. Russia is trying to exhaust interceptor magazines faster than Western defense industry can replenish them. Over the past week, Ukrainian President Zelensky confirmed that Russian forces fired approximately 1,700 attack drones, nearly 1,400 guided aerial bombs, and approximately 60 missiles of various types at Ukraine in a single 7-day period. Even at Ukraine's reported interception rate exceeding 90% of incoming drones through layered air defense employment, a 10% penetration rate against a 1,900 drone weekly launch tempo yields 190 impacts per week. Against a compact, dense port infrastructure environment like Odesa, that is a statistically decisive degradation rate. The specific overnight engagement examined here consisted of 94 drones launched since 6 p.m. local time, of which 74 were downed or neutralized. 20 drones penetrated the defensive envelope. That is the operationally relevant number. 20 kinetic payloads, each carrying approximately 50 kilograms of high explosive, distributed across a port complex and adjacent residential infrastructure. Port infrastructure of the greater Odesa hub was struck, and a Nauru-flagged commercial vessel sustained damage while moving through a Ukrainian maritime corridor. An energy facility within the cargo terminal was hit, causing localized fires. This targeting sequence reveals a deliberate dual-track engagement logic. Track 1, infrastructure degradation. Power substations, cargo terminal energy nodes, crane systems, fuel storage. Each hit forces repair cycles that interrupt commercial port operations. Track 2, maritime deterrence messaging. Striking a commercial vessel inside an officially designated safe corridor is a signal to global ship owners that no corridor designation provides operational sanctuary. It is a legal fiction being exposed by kinetic reality. Russia's tactical evolution in this campaign has been significant. Early war drone attacks were relatively linear, single axis, consistent altitude, predictable timing windows. Ukrainian air defense adapted and achieved high intercept rates. Russian planners responded with layered saturation architecture, simultaneous multi-axis ingress, altitude variance between 50 meters and 3,000 meters on different platforms, timing offsets designed to saturate radar tracking cues, and, critically, the integration of decoy drones that carry no warhead but consume interceptor rounds and radar processing capacity. The operational effect is to force air defense commanders to make triage decisions in real time, which inbound signatures are warhead carrying, which are decoys, and which represent the ballistic missile or cruise missile buried within the swarm that is the actual high-value kinetic payload. Simultaneously, as Odesa was absorbing this strike package, Ukraine launched a counterstrike on the Russian warship Admiral Grigorovich, the first frigate equipped with Kalibr cruise missiles, docked at Russia's Black Sea port of Novorossiysk. This simultaneous dual strike, Odesa and Novorossiysk, opposite ends of the northern Black Sea coast, in the same operational window, is not coincidental. It is the operational signature of a conflict that has fully migrated from land-centric warfare into a distributed maritime littoral domain where both combatants are attempting to deny the other's use of the sea, not through naval surface engagement, but through unmanned kinetic systems deployed from shore-based launch platforms. The Admiral Grigorovich engagement, if confirmed as damaging, removes a Kalibr cruise missile delivery platform from Russia's order of battle. Kalibr being the primary long-range precision strike asset used against Ukrainian infrastructure at ranges exceeding 1,500 kilometers. This is counterforce targeting executed by naval drones. The cost of that strike asset to Ukraine is a fraction of one Kalibr reload cycle. This is asymmetric warfare in its most clinically pure expression. The destruction of military hardware and the wounding of civilians in Odesa are the headlines. The global economic transmission mechanism is the story no one is covering, and it will affect every person watching this video, regardless of whether they have any geopolitical investment in Ukraine's survival. Start with maritime war risk insurance, because that is where the cascade begins. 7-day war risk rates for vessels calling at Ukrainian ports have climbed to approximately 0.5% of hull value, up from roughly 0.4% the prior week. Insurance coverage for Russian Black Sea ports has moved into the 0.65–0.8% range. Those percentages appear small in isolation. They are not small in application. On a Panamax bulk carrier with a hull value of $35 million, a 0.5% war risk rate represents a $175,000 per voyage premium, in addition to standard P&I coverage, crew hazard pay supplements, and extended voyage routing costs. For a voyage that might generate $200,000 in gross freight revenue on a good week, the economic math begins to invert. Ship owners do not operate on ideology, they operate on margin. And when premium creep erodes margin to zero, ships do not sail. Maritime security analysts have tracked at least 7 blast incidents on tankers that previously called at Russian ports since December 2024, including incidents in the Mediterranean. And underwriters are now pricing in a broader list of potential strike zones and a higher probability of repeat incidents. This repricing is not limited to vessels calling at Odesa or Novorossiysk. It is spreading across the entire northern Black Sea commercial zone. The downstream food security implications are severe and immediate. Ukraine is one of the world's 5 largest exporters of wheat, corn, and sunflower oil. The Black Sea Maritime Corridor is not an alternative route for these exports. It is the only viable bulk export route. The port of Odesa and its affiliated terminals at Pivdeny and Chornomorsk collectively represent the overwhelming majority of Ukraine's grain export capacity. When that corridor becomes operationally contested, not closed but contested, buyer nations must price in supply disruption risk. Egypt, the world's largest wheat importer, sources a substantial fraction of its requirements from Ukraine. Tunisia, Morocco, Lebanon, Pakistan, all heavily exposed to Ukrainian grain supply. Any sustained degradation of Odesa's operational throughput transmits directly into North African and Middle Eastern food price inflation within approximately 45 to 90 days. That is the lag time between port disruption and retail bread price. Now layer in the compounding context of the broader global maritime crisis. The Strait of Hormuz has been largely blocked since February 2026, with approximately 25% of the world's seaborne oil trade and 20% of global LNG previously transiting through it. The global maritime insurance market is simultaneously absorbing the Hormuz crisis and the Black Sea escalation. Crude oil prices surpassed $100 per barrel and reached a high of $126 following the Hormuz closure, the fastest price surge seen in any recent conflict. In that environment, a sustained degradation of Black Sea grain corridor capacity is not a regional food security problem. It is an inflationary accelerant on top of an already overheated global commodity complex. Continued maritime attacks threaten major shipping routes, increase insurance costs, and risk significant disruptions to supply chains. Shipping operators that have already stopped transiting the Black Sea will likely continue to avoid the area, while those still operating may reconsider following additional strikes. For macro investors, the signal is clear. Black Sea agricultural commodity futures, global dry bulk freight rates, and food-linked inflation instruments are all being re-rated in real time by this strike campaign. This is not a local conflict with local consequences. It is a distributed kinetic pressure campaign with global economic transmission built directly into its operational design. I want to be direct with you about where this leaves Western policymakers, because the dilemma is genuinely bleak. And I am not going to sanitize it for you. Washington currently faces two paths, and neither of them is clean. Path 1, escalate. Dramatically accelerate the delivery of advanced interceptor systems to Ukraine, Patriots, THAAD equivalent architecture, deep magazine resupply, in sufficient volume to actually suppress Russia's weekly drone launch tempo rather than simply intercept a high percentage of a mathematically overwhelming number. The problem: Western defense industrial production cannot currently match the volume at which Russia is expending Shaheds and Gerans. The interceptor cost asymmetry I described earlier means every week of sustained suppression is fiscally corrosive to NATO's own inventories, which are already depleted against the backdrop of Hormuz. Escalation has a ceiling determined by factory throughput, not political will. Path 2, negotiate from the current position. The problem with that path is equally stark. Every week that Russia successfully degrades Odesa's commercial throughput, it accumulates strategic leverage. Ceasefire negotiations conducted while Russia holds functional dominance over Black Sea commercial traffic are negotiations conducted under duress. Whatever agreement emerges from that table will be structured to reflect that coercive reality. I want to know what you think. Comment below with your tactical assessment. Does Ukraine have the defensive architecture to hold the maritime corridor, or is the compression of this conflict going to force a negotiated outcome on Russian terms? Subscribe and turn on notifications. Tomorrow's briefing goes deeper on the Novorossiysk counterstrike and what the loss of the Admiral Grigorovich means for Russia's long-range strike posture.